Hi, everyone, and welcome to another special Talk Insomnia episode. Nina is back. Welcome back, Nina.
Hello. Hi.
How are you today?
Yeah, I'm good. Thank you.
All
How are you,
right.
Daniel?
I'm good. I'm good. Thank you. And so, yes, for anyone out there who doesn't know Nina, you've been a guest before. In fact, you were a guest in Talking Insomnia number 74, which we just checked. We talked about a year ago in September of 2021. So it's been more than a year since then. So today we're just going to chat about like how things went from then. And I call this the Life After Insomnia series.
Mm.
But before we do, tell the audience a little bit like where in the world are you?
Still in Australia, in Sydney. So yeah, so I'm literally in the future. You have a Thursday there, and I'm in Friday. So it's pretty funny. Yeah, and it's spring here, which
I was
means
going to ask
we have
about that.
autumn. Yeah.
Right? It's funny. Very interesting. All right. So yeah, without further ado, we talked about a year ago, and by the way, I want to mention that somebody named Ruxi, who was actually a member of our immunity program, she really identified with your episode, just
Mm.
like you identified a lot with Alina, and she said, "I want to
Yeah.
hear from Nina again. Like, is it possible to really leave insomnia after what she
Mm.
went through, etc." So you're here by special request. But that said, after we talked, how did things go after that?
Yeah, good. Yeah, been sleeping fine, obviously. Getting back into my 10 hours of sleep routine on the weekends. And yet still, obviously, the thoughts, the fearful thoughts don't disappear magically forever and never come back. So every time I traveled, they would still come back. Because the previous trips when I did have insomnia, there was a couple of trips where I had an absolutely sleepless night. And that sort of, really got stuck in the brain. So it still warns me when I travel. But because I have knowledge of what's going on, you can sort of, when you have knowledge, you become separate from it. So I just let the brain do its job. I sort of accepted the fact that perhaps when I travel, maybe for a while, it'll keep warning me. It could be a few years before it stops warning me when I travel. So because I've accepted that, I'll let the brain warn me and then just go to sleep. So that's been fine. It was just a few, but every night was okay. And so in the normal routine, every night was fine. Those brains pretty much stopped warning me, stopped giving the fearful thoughts. So it does stop over time. It's not like we're stuck forever with the fearful thoughts, but it's those situations that triggered that sometimes. But I was still able to sleep just because I separated myself from it, which was okay. Yeah.
Yeah. And yeah, you remember you said that before the insomnia, like you were one of those people who slept a lot, and now you're back to that.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah. So on the days when I can,
Yes.
I'll just keep sleeping. Yeah, my husband complains about that, but it's fine. I'm loving it.
That's funny. I have to ask you now, like during your insomnia, I'm sure you did actually, but you had some of this like sleep envy, or didn't you, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
now
So
he's having kind of sleep envy,
yeah,
or is he just annoyed?
yeah, more annoyed. Well, he sleeps fine. He doesn't have any problems
Exactly.
in that area at all. But yeah, he gets annoyed that I don't get up until after 10 some days, but I probably should. So it is possible to overcome it and get to the point where we were our old selves before insomnia, because that's the way I used to sleep my whole life. And I was wondering the same thing as this person, whether I can ever have it back. But yeah, it's just basically a matter of forgetting and letting go. And over time, the brain just stopped being so agitated around this topic of sleep, and it just got back to normal.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's definitely possible.
So it's gonna be so inspiring and nice to hear this for the community. Now, I want to jump into a topic that I almost forgot about. You are one of the protagonists in Tales of Courage, where I've taken the transcript from interviews and formatted into a book. And I sent you a copy. And I think if I remember correctly, you said something to the fact that, wow, I almost don't remember that person that's in the book. Can you expand on that?
Yeah, so it does become like a different personality, because that personality that I had while I had insomnia was really fearful, worried. When you ask, in the insomnia cycle and you feel like you're stuck in it, you do feel quite stuck, and the brain changes quite a lot, and then everything becomes fearful because you're in that mode of fear, and then life feels just heavy and scary. So insomnia does affect you in that way as well. And then, being in that, I thought, wow, what's going on? Life was actually pretty good. My circumstances were great, but I just felt really, really bad because of, dwelling on that fear and going along with it. So yeah, and being out of that, it does feel like some distant memory where, just some stressful period of time that happened and that's it. There's no reason to go through it again unless you choose to go through it by dwelling on that fear. So yeah, it does feel like it when you move on. But when you're in it, it does feel like it's quite hard to get out because fear does impact us in that way. Fear can be very, very intense and makes us feel stuck without hope. So while in it, it was really hard to even believe that, I could be back to normal. But then, yeah, just a very simple realization was that just don't dwell on that fear. Don't give in. Don't dwell on insomnia, and just gradually, by not thinking about it consciously, and obviously subconscious thoughts came up from before. There's many, many of them that kept coming up, but I just wouldn't dwell on them either. I just notice them come up, it's like the mindfulness meditation. I just would notice them come up and that's it, and do nothing. Sometimes when I would go to sleep back in that day, and I realized that the whole point is to not think about sleep. That's when I realized it was a big game changer because it was so simple. And that's when it hit me. Oh, just don't think about it and it can't exist, because insomnia is basically in thoughts. What if I don't sleep? What if this? What if that? It's a lot of what ifs and a lot of thoughts that create fear that prevent us from sleeping. Insomnia is not something external. It's very much internal. So when I realized that, basically don't think about it and don't dwell on those thoughts and it'll go away. And then, of course, when I went to sleep, they still come up, those thoughts. And I even turned it another way around. I would notice the thoughts and then really try to even hold it and dive into it and even intensify it. You know what I mean? Trying to really face it. But it's funny, the more I try to dive into it and hold on to it, and then it would just instantly disappear. You sort of dissolve it on the spot when you really, really don't care, and you face it and you say, okay, brain, what's another one? Give me another one. And then brain would give me 2, 3, 4, 5 other thoughts. What if this? What if that? And then it'll stop eventually, after it's giving me all the warnings, one after another. I just lay down there in the bed and listen to each one of them. And then there was nothing else. So that means there's only a certain number of those thoughts. Then some people, it could be a few hours of a lot of fearful thoughts, but they stop. It's not like they will keep popping up forever. Especially they stop if you listen to them and don't react, don't analyze them, don't dwell on them. And then they just come and go like waves in the ocean. So that was a big realization, just not thinking about it. And it just, after some time, they stopped popping up and there was no more anything around sleep. It was just nothing. It was just sleep, like breathing. Yeah.
It's amazing. And it's, I want to, I had sort of a follow-up question for you that you already answered, but to put what you said in my words, there's this paradox here because, you're mentioning several times, just don't think about it. But then the question people are going to have is like, okay, how do I not think about it? And then you actually say, well, try to focus on it. Try to listen to everything. Yeah. It's a paradox, right?
Yeah, it sounds like a paradox. So by consciously not thinking about it. So for instance, when I would go around about my day, I wouldn't think about anything about sleep, kind of like, oh, should I take this pill tonight? Or should I stretch before sleep? I wouldn't do anything like that. So nothing conscious that you choose to think, didn't choose to think anything. But then obviously old thoughts from before used to come up. But yeah, so my approach was either just don't dwell on them and let them come and go without any emotion. So basically thoughts always feed, thoughts intensify and become really, really sticky if there's emotion behind them. And fear is the strongest emotion. So giving any kind of emotion to those thoughts would make them stick, and brain makes it, even puts another label. Okay, fear this, and keep warning her. If you really fear it, it'll make a sticker and keep warning you even more, because it's the survival mechanism. It'll keep warning you all the time. So for me, it was not thinking about sleep in a way that I wouldn't think about it consciously, but when they would come up, I wouldn't give it any fear. I wouldn't, because I realized that insomnia feeds off fear. It's quite strong. The fear is what feeds it. So I decided not to give it any emotion. However, because I was in a later stage, so perhaps I was more brave, I thought that, oh, what if they come up? And I faced them to the point where I even tried to kind of hold on to it and see what, I was just curious to seeing what, like if I dive into the thought, if you know what I mean, kind of really dive deep into it and see what's there. But the funny thing, as soon as I, would dive into that thought and just be with it, it just dissipates so quickly. And I found that with other fearful thoughts as well, when they come up, some really bad what ifs, I would not analyze it or fear it. I would just really notice it and just dive into it. But behind it, there's nothing, because thoughts are just made up.
Yes.
They're made up, yeah. So there's literally nothing inside of that thought. So it disappears when you try to look what's inside. So I would dive in just out of curiosity. So it wasn't for any other purpose, to be honest. But
Exactly.
by doing that, it dissipated even more.
So fascinating. So fascinating. And I have to ask you a question. When we spoke like a year ago, and one of the reasons, by the way, that, and I mentioned this in the forward to in the book, that the first, when I had this idea to write this book, the first story I picked to see if this would work was yours, because I remember your story being like, it was so dramatic, so many up and down, so many big insights, but then like being sucked into the struggle again. And speaking to you a year ago, it was almost like a different energy. You had like a more it's like, the storytelling from your end was very like dramatic. It was like intense, and this happened and this like that. Today, when I'm speaking to you, I sense more like you seem more zen, kind of more calm. I don't know if that's just random, or would you comment on that?
Yeah, so definitely being, seeing how the mind works, because that's what insomnia leads you to. You notice how your mind works, how the thoughts work. It led me to many other, realizations and observations about the mind. So, definitely led me to understand why I have other fears and why I feel this way about that situation, that person. So, but having that approach of mindfulness where you don't let those thoughts influence you that much, you don't give them fear, there is a lot more peace, definitely. So I've started doing that with sleep, but also there's other fears that come up. But I just would apply the same approach. I would just dive into that fear, and then right away it dissipates. I also learned about it from the Sonoma approach. It's just a nice approach on letting go of all of the unhelpful emotions. You can literally let go of any bad emotion. And the point of that book is that we can let go. We don't, and a lot of people hold on to the fear, hold on to those, fear of insomnia. They hold on to it. But the point is that you can just let go. We have a choice to not do it, and we can just drop it. So same with fear, you can sort of notice it, and then you can just drop it, and it drops away. And having that realization that we have control over our emotions, even if they are really intense. But once you really dive into that emotion, there is really nothing there, because it's made up. Those thoughts are always made up. So it definitely made me more chill in life with other things too, but definitely around sleep. That's what really helped, seeing that it's just thoughts. Insomnia is in form of thoughts. There's lots and lots of thoughts that we've created over years of not sleeping. And those lots and lots of those thoughts feed it and make it into a real thing. But those thoughts are made up. So it really stands on nothing. And there's nothing inside of those thoughts. They're just made up. It's really quite fragile if you look at what insomnia is made of. If you really zoom in more and more and more, there's nothing there.
There's nothing there. Wow. And now, before you had insomnia, had you had any interest in like mindfulness or any sort of like spiritual things, like inner work, anything like that, or was it new to you?
No, I was definitely like like many people, unfortunately, we're not taught at school about how to control our thoughts, our emotions, although it must be a must subject. So I was always a victim of my own thoughts, circumstances, and often, people like that tend to also be controlled by fear. That's why insomnia got me. I just went along with every fear emotion, with every bad thought. I was a victim of them. So my mind controlled me in a really bad way. In other areas as well. So I couldn't control my thoughts, couldn't control my emotions. And that's where, so I'm in a way happy that I had such a bad experience, dramatic experience. It was bad at the time, but, and then it leads you to understand other things about the mind. So I'm pretty happy about that, but definitely I was a victim of all of that. And it's so hard to live that way. So it really opens up this whole new life where you don't have to be, and we have a lot of choice. And mind is actually meant to be a tool that we use, and we are sort of in charge. We are master of the mind. We command the mind about what we want to do, and the mind has to follow. And unfortunately today it's the other way around, where the mind controls us and is a master over us, and we just really fear it and give the mind so much importance and so much, value. And so the mind ends up really, really trapping some people when they become victims of it. So with insomnia, it was definitely the case. Yeah.
Let's dive in here for a second, because some of the the community here will be like, will probably hear this and say like, hey, but Daniel, hey, you always say like you can't control your thoughts, but Nina's saying you can control your thoughts. The way I see it is something like thoughts, like you said, are kind of fragile. They just happen, and weirdly, it's kind of, when we don't try to control them, they become fleeting or just like dissipate. And then somebody could say, well, do you have a choice not to try to control them or not? Well, that gets into like free will, like really deep philosophical things. But when you say you can control thoughts or emotions, what do you mean by that?
Yeah, in a way that all kinds of thoughts may come. They may be very intense fear, or negativity or complaining, but it's in our power to not let it go out of control, because they can really intensify. So when you really notice those thoughts and think, oh no, what if that happens? And then you believe that thought, and then you really choose to go along with it and keep dwelling on it. Okay, what if this? And then I'll feel this way, and then it'll change my life. And then you keep thinking about it, that what if, and keep intensifying it and making it a bigger deal, although it started with one little thought. So we have a choice to notice that thought and believe our mind, although it's just a made up thought. You don't have to believe it, but we have a choice to really be controlled by it. Like in case with sleep, we can notice that thought and keep thinking about it and believing it. And then it becomes very sticky and 10 times more intense than it was when it came up.
Yeah.
And so then they stick around, and then they multiply. If you give attention to the little one, more will come,
Exactly.
and then they just overtake you and overpower you. And it all started with choosing to believe that thought and choosing to dwell on it and, interacting with it. You notice it and you interact with it by feeling feelings about that thought and believing it, basically. So there's a choice to do that, or there is a choice, in my understanding, to see those thoughts come up and just be like, oh, okay, next one, and just go to the next thing and give it nothing. No analyzing, no emotion, no other thoughts linked to it. So there's a choice to just not dwell on it and not accept it, because our brain, basically thoughts of these programs from the past, they don't come out of nothing. They have been, it's either us who program ourselves to think that way, and so they get programmed and then they keep coming up for years, or it could be the world, people in the world or in media, movies, and they also get programmed into our minds. So it doesn't have to be from our own origin, but all kinds of thoughts can come up based on what happened in the past. And they all come up because that's just how the mind works to interpret the world around us. But we have a choice. If it's something that we don't want to dwell on, we have a choice not to dwell on it. Yeah. So it's not like we have to believe every single thought.
Right.
Yeah, so that's how I understand it.
Yeah. No, it makes a lot of sense. And what you just said towards the end here, it reminded me of something I've been like pondering which is one of these paradoxes where it often seems like, insomnia has gotten like has a life of its own, and we got to do something to stop it. But in a way, it's the complete other way around, that insomnia is fed by our. Insomnia actually requires a lot of effort. It requires you to try this, try that, try to stop this, try that. So it's the opposite way. It's the other way around, isn't it?
That's why it's confusing to so many of those who suffer. They really have this urge to deal with it, to solve it. We want to solve it like it's a problem, but it's quite the opposite. What helped me when I used to feel like I was stuck was to think back to the years, my whole life, when I slept well. And I thought, well, how did I sleep well then? What did I do? And I would really imagine those moments when I go to bed. What do I think? What do I do? And I realized I did absolutely nothing. There was no thinking linked to sleep, no attention given to sleep. And I thought, oh, well, if I did that my whole life, obviously my body knows how to do it without my intervention. Just do that, And I realized it's really that easy. Sleep doesn't require any effort at all. It's just a bodily function. Night comes, it gets dark outside, it's a getting rhythm, boom, it sleeps, just like it digests the food without us having to ask the body to do it. It breathes without our attention as well. So that's what was helpful. But definitely not like it's paradox. It's a paradox trying, you want to solve it because you see it as a problem.
Yes.
It's funny though, but then the more you give it attention, the more brain understands, okay, so it is a problem. We need to solve it. And then it feeds the fear and makes it more intense. So for me, it was just realization that I have to drain it of any attention, because attention is what gives it energy. So no energy, no attention. And then over time, it just shrinks up and just disappears because there's nothing feeding it.
That's what. Now I remember like how I was looking for this way. I worded it one time, but it was basically what you said, that the paradox. You can word the paradox that's this that insomnia actually requires lots of things. It requires like fear. It requires resistance. It requires efforts. Peaceful sleep actually requires nothing, and that's it's really a paradox. But super nice. And now maybe do you have any examples? You mentioned maybe relationships, maybe work, maybe something else. Are other aspects of your life where this kind of a new mindset and these understandings have been helpful to you?
Yeah, definitely. Just being able, understanding that we can control our mind. That means we can control many aspects of our life because our life is interpreted through our mind. So it sort of links to everything. For instance, when just fearful mood or anxious mood comes in, and something I don't want to experience, but I feel like I will, and the mind starts to panic and just really that those moments when the mind just starts to panic about something and it feels really uncomfortable. So when I notice it, I'm able to bring it down and just calm it down and kind of get a control over it. Whereas before, when I used to be a victim of every single thought, every emotion, I would panic with the mind and panic together with panic. We were on the same page, and I was just a part of that mind. Although we are not a part of it, we are separate from it. So being separate from the mind, there's little thoughts going on. But whenever there is a good one, I choose to dwell on it. If there is a good thought, something nice, I notice it and I sort of get deeper into it and dwell on it more and more. And then it becomes better and it intensifies in positivity. So kind of not understanding that we can develop a filter. That's why so many today are obsessed with gratitude. It's helpful to deal with this life, developing that filter of noticing things I love about life. And just like when we obsess about, sleep and not sleeping, and then it intensifies. If we obsess about what we enjoy and what we love and who we love, it also intensifies and becomes dominant. So I sort of taught myself and changed me in a way that I've become happier just by choosing to dwell on things that I want to be obsessed about, like good things. So it can go the other way. It doesn't have to be, not obsessing over negativity. You can obsess over positivity and it'll become stronger. So yeah, so that helped me to just become happier, and definitely helped in relationships with people, because when you're happy and not miserable, that helps, doesn't it? And just not allowing fears to get out of control. Just noticing them and applying the same principle by noticing the fear and just gently letting go and moving on to the next subject and not dwelling on it. And those sort of fearful thoughts, they really require your attention, because the brain warns you. It's just listen to me, you're in danger. So it's really easy to fall into that with fear. And there's so many of us have fears today. So being able to control those fears really changes life, and you just become more chill, which is a good thing.
It's a very, very nice thing. Very nice. And I think just want to emphasize what you said in the beginning here, that there were times where you didn't think it possible that you could be, your old self again. And now you are, and it's been a year since I spoke to you, and you're doing so well. So it's super nice having had this conversation with you and bringing so much hope to the community. Any last words of wisdom you want to share with everyone before we say bye?
Just perhaps when you do feel stuck in it, like I did, although it's a simple realization that not thinking about sleep will eventually make those thoughts disappear and become more, just not as strong. But although at first, when a person might hear it, it might sound simple, but it is true. It's just the thoughts that support it. However, once we make a decision to not think about it, not think about sleep, not giving it attention, it'll still feel heavy. Insomnia will still feel like this heavy cloud over us, this heavy burden. And the first days or weeks, it might feel like nothing is changing, but it's important to just push through those first few weeks, because this really heavy burden will still be there for a little bit. And people might think, okay, it's not working. It still feels heavy. I still feel fear, and it's okay. It's absolutely normal to, just like any trauma in life, there's people who are traumatized by events. They might choose to move on, and trauma might still feel heavy. But it's just accepting that it might feel that way for a while, because it was quite traumatic, not, being in so much fear for such a long time. It was traumatic, and understanding that it's going to take some time to heal, and then just applying the principle of, okay, don't dwell on it, just let it be, let it be, let it be. And then it does become weaker. Doesn't even take that long. Doesn't take that long. When you suck the energy out of it, it will weaken. So it's important to not get upset in the first few days or weeks when it still feels that way. Still push through, apply the principles, and let it be. It will get weaker. So it's important, because for me, I would get obsessed with, okay, it's not working. It still feels heavy. So that's why I'm wanting to not give in and not get upset.
Very, very nice. Yeah, I think that'll help a lot of people.
Yeah.
Wonderful. Well, again, thanks for being back, Nina, and be well and be in touch.
Thanks, Daniel.
Okay. Bye now.